All right, so get ready, because we are diving deep into self-consciousness today, thanks to your pick
Oh, yeah.
from Philippe Rochat,
Okay.
Others in Mind.
Good.
And I got to say, this excerpt really got me thinking.
Yeah, Rochel's work is so fascinating because he takes like this everyday thing, right?
Yeah.
Being self-aware.
Right.
And he's like, whoa, this is actually deeply connected to like our whole social world.
Yeah.
It's not just, looking inward. It's about how we understand ourselves through other people's eyes.
He really flips the script on how we usually think about the self.
He does.
Like, it's so easy to assume that, our inner voice, this like self,
Yeah.
it's separate from the world.
Right.
But Rochat makes you wonder, is it even possible
Yeah.
to be self-aware
Right.
without other people
Yeah.
to reflect that back to us?
Exactly. He goes straight for this like fundamental question. He calls it the humanity question.
Okay.
And it's like this age-old thing, right? What makes us different from animals?
Right.
And Rochat's like a huge part of it is this ability we have to step outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're both the actor and the audience
I like that.
in the play of our own lives.
Yeah, and that's what I find so interesting, because that outside perspective,
Yeah.
it's not always a good audience.
Right.
It's not always, positive.
Exactly.
It feels like we're constantly trying to balance our own internal experience of ourselves with how we think other people are seeing us.
Yeah.
How does Rochat approach that, tension?
Well, he says that this need to belong, right? This deep fear of being rejected socially, it's so deeply ingrained in us that it actually shapes our self-consciousness.
Huh.
He even goes so far as to call shame like this human distress maker.
So you're saying this fear of not measuring up,
Yeah.
like it's hardwired into us.
That's what he's suggesting. And it's not just theoretical. He's got this example from the Biami tribe in Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
They had never seen their reflections before.
Wow.
So when they encountered mirrors for the first time,
Right.
their reaction wasn't curiosity, it was terror.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild?
That's both fascinating and kind of scary.
Right.
Who knew a mirror could be that terrifying? What does Rochat say is behind that reaction?
So he says it shows how powerful it is to confront yourself as like an object in the world, seen through someone else's eyes.
Yeah.
And Rochat argues we're hardwired to avoid that kind of disruption to our sense of self.
Yep.
So that like awkward feeling we've all felt,
Totally.
that's like that primal fear coming out.
Yes.
Are we all secretly terrified of being like found out as some kind of imposter?
That's something he really digs into.
Yeah.
And it's not that he thinks this social sensitivity is all bad.
Right.
This awareness of how people see us, this fear of judgment,
Yeah.
it helps us form relationships.
Okay.
Cooperate, build societies.
Yeah.
We evolve to care what others think because it helps us survive.
Okay. So it's not all bad.
Right.
But you realize how much energy we spend like managing these different versions of ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're always on stage
It's true.
adjusting our performance to the audience.
And that is where his breakdown of self-awareness is so interesting.
Okay.
He talks about how babies start with basic bodily awareness.
And as they grow, they get these more complex layers of self-understanding, always in relation to other people. He even calls them meta levels of awareness because it's like thinking about thinking.
Whoa.
About ourselves as thinkers, as social beings.
So from baby to philosopher,
Right.
it always comes back to this feedback loop
Exactly.
with other people, this
Yeah.
constant interplay between what's going on inside us and what signals we're getting from everyone else.
It all ties together
Yeah.
in a way, yeah. And that gap, that constant negotiation between the two, that's what he sees as like the core of being human. We're always trying to make those two things match up, who we think we are and who we think other people think we are.
Makes you wonder if there even is such a thing as a true self.
Right.
Or if it's all just masks we put on.
Yeah.
Depending on who we're with.
Totally. And Rochat gets into that. He tells the story about a guy named John
Okay.
who has this crazy nightmare where like all these different roles he plays in his life, son, husband, lover,
Right.
they all get thrown together. It's like all his different selves are fighting for attention.
Yeah, remind me about that dream again.
Okay.
It's like his whole world was collapsing, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's like his whole social life implodes. He's in this bar
Right.
and his mother, his wife, his mistresses, even a male lover,
Whoa.
they all show up at the same time.
Oh my God.
And he's like, I felt my identity just melting away
Intense.
under the weight of their gaze.
Yeah. What makes that dream so insightful, though?
It shows how fragile our self-image is. Like how much it depends on keeping those different parts of our lives separate.
Right.
And it all goes back to that fear of rejection, because the
That's
nightmare isn't just about being seen.
right.
It's about losing the love and approval of everyone there.
It's like that fear is controlling us,
Totally.
even when we don't realize it.
Yeah, and it's not even just about avoiding the bad stuff.
Okay.
It's also about getting that positive attention.
Okay. How so?
Think about social media.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
It's like this mirror, right?
Right.
Where we're constantly trying to craft this image of ourselves.
Yeah.
We're all trying to get those likes and
Well,
validation.
we're all performing for that audience.
Exactly. Hoping people see us a certain way.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this need for approval connect to Rochat's ideas about the self?
This is where it gets really interesting.
I think connects self-consciousness to this sense of ownership.
Mm.
He says that as we become self-aware,
Yeah.
we also start to understand things like sharing and possession,
Interesting.
like knowing what's mine versus yours.
Okay.
It's a big part of growing up socially.
That's fascinating. Something as simple as sharing is connected to all this.
Right.
Didn't Rochat also study how little kids learn to share?
Yeah, he did.
What do you find?
He found that even really little kids,
Okay.
like toddlers,
Yeah.
understand the idea of fairness,
Mm.
which means it might not just be something we learn from rules and punishments.
Interesting.
It could be deeper than that. Like, it's in our nature to get it.
Wow. So we're hardwired for fairness.
Well, it's not that simple. He says it's both nature and nurture.
Okay.
Like, the idea of fairness seems universal.
Right.
But how it plays out is different everywhere.
Oh, that's a good point. Give me an example.
He talks about organ donation laws.
Okay.
Like in France, it's opt-out.
Right. So you have to say, I don't want to do it.
Exactly. But in the U.S., you have to opt in.
You have to say, I want to be a donor.
Yep. Same concept, but different values.
Right. It shows how different cultures think about ownership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to our own bodies.
What does Rochat say about those differences?
He says it shows how these social values get all wrapped up in how we see ourselves.
That's deep.
Right. And it makes you think, what happens when that sense of fairness is broken?
Ooh, good question. What happens when things aren't fair?
What happens when someone breaks the social contract?
We feel like cheated, right?
Exactly.
Like we need to get even.
It's like we have this internal scale. Interesting.
Always weighing our needs against everyone else's.
And that scale is like calibrated by our childhoods. Right?
Exactly. By all those early experiences with sharing,
Right.
learning to balance what we want
Yeah.
with what other people need.
So all those fights over toys,
Totally.
they're actually shaping our sense of right and wrong.
Exactly. Those early interactions, they teach us about social contracts, about give and take.
It's like learning how to be part of the society.
Exactly. And those lessons, they stay with us.
Right. From our personal lives to
Yeah.
like politics even.
It's all connected. It's this constant push and pull
Between what?
between what we want for ourselves
Yeah.
and what we owe to everyone else.
And Rochat gives us a new way to think about that struggle.
He really does.
It's wild to think about. Huh.
It really is.
Like all those little moments from childhood.
Yeah.
Sharing, those first times we realize we're like a separate person.
Yeah.
They're connected to these like big social structures.
Right. And those anxieties.
Totally. It's like this web of expectations.
That's a great way to put it, like a web woven from shame, envy, pride.
It's intense.
Yeah. All those messy emotions that come with being human.
Yeah. He doesn't sugarcoat it, does he?
Not at all.
It's like he's saying self-awareness is a good thing and a bad thing all at once.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the downsides he talks about?
Well, he talks about the burden of self-reflection,
Okay.
that pressure to be good enough.
Right. Which we all feel.
Totally. He even uses this term self-idealization.
What's that?
It's like how we create these perfect images of ourselves.
Yeah.
But they're not real, so then we end up disappointed.
Because reality never lives up to the fantasy.
Exactly. And he actually defines it too. He says it's like seeing ourselves as better than we are.
Oof. That's got to sting when you fall short.
Right.
It's like that imposter syndrome thing.
Yes.
That feeling that we're not as smart or successful as we pretend to be.
Exactly. And he says that fear of being found out, it can be motivating, It can push us to achieve great things, right?
Okay, yeah.
But it can also backfire, lead to self-sabotage.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like all that pressure just seemed perfect on social media.
Exactly.
It's exhausting.
It really is. And it plays right into those fears Rochat's talking about.
It's like we're all looking in funhouse mirrors,
Right.
seeing all these distorted versions of ourselves, and then judging them.
It's a recipe for unhappiness.
Right. So how do we escape that?
Well, that's where Rochat takes an interesting turn. He says there's another side to all this.
Really? Okay, I'm listening. What's the good part of all this introspection?
He thinks that same ability to look inward, to see ourselves from the outside, it could be the root of empathy,
Interesting.
compassion, even our sense of justice.
How so?
Think about it being able to see yourself in other people,
Okay.
connect with what they're going through. That's how we build relationships, how we learn to care for each other.
So the same thing that makes us insecure can also make us better people.
That's the idea. It's like this power we have inside us. It can be used for good or bad.
I like that.
Hmm.
He doesn't give us all the answers, but he gives us a lot to think about.
He really does. And he leaves us with this big question. Can this awareness of ourselves as social beings help us create a better world?
Oh, whoa. Now that is something to ponder.
Right.
It's like he's saying we're all connected.
Exactly.
And our sense of self, it's not separate from everyone else.
It's all part of the same fabric.
We're not just these isolated individuals.
We're part of something bigger.
It's a call to action then, right?
I think so.
If we want to make the world a better place, we have to understand how this social mirror works.
How it shapes us.
How it shapes everything.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been heavy.
It's a lot to take in.
But in a good way.
For sure. It makes you think.
It really does. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into Rochat's work has given you some new perspectives to consider.
Yeah.
Keep those questions coming, and until next time, happy diving.